Hello, everyone. Welcome to the sixth episode of Change with Colton. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Nilay Parikh. He is the founder and CEO of Arvist, a supply chain digital twin platform. Before Arvist, he has worked with various multinational software and manufacturing companies in a variety of product management capacities. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Colton. Thanks for having me.
To jump in, before we talk about Arvist, can you take us through your career leading up to it and what led to jump into entrepreneurship?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, just to give a little bit of my background, I'm a first gen immigrant to the United States. Moved here from India almost 12 years ago now. Came to University of Southern California in Los Angeles for my master's in aerospace engineering and spent early half of my career in 3D printing and additive manufacturing space. It was during this time that I got recruited by a Danish company called Danfoss. It's a family-owned business, but it's a multi-billion dollar, I think $8 billion in size now. They do all kinds of manufacturing from HVAC to hydraulics. And I was recruited for a very interesting role, which entailed essentially me going to different Danfoss locations around the world and setting up these advanced manufacturing or Industry 4.0 excellence centers for them. So this job took me to Denmark, their headquarters. Spent 6 months over there. Went to India, China, Germany, and was back in the U.S. Mostly in the Midwest, where their majority of the operations are. So that's what brought me to Chicago, where I'm located now. But that was the role where, at first, uh, instances or ideas of Arvist were born in the sense that visiting a lot of these factories, warehouses, distribution centers that the company had brought me brought it to my notice that a lot of the processes inside these places are very manual, right? They're very outdated, and we're not talking about a mom and pop shop, right? This is a multi-billion dollar company, yet their processes are very outdated. So that was the first thing, first time that we started noticing that. It was my then manager that I was speaking with. It's like, hey, there's a lot of things that can be changed over here in terms of safety, in terms of processes. And that's where he encouraged me to like, that's a good idea. Maybe that's something that you can come up with as a product in terms of making just safety more proactive, right? So that was the initial idea of Arvist. We were called B Global Safety back then. That was the first, just a working title of the company, which we proposed a few proof of concepts, pilots. We got one, and someone said like, yeah, that seems like an interesting idea. Let's do something about it. So we registered it overnight, and that name stuck. So this was like late 2021, early 2022. So almost 19, 20 months ago now. But that was my first foray into the startup world.
Awesome. It sounds like a amazing story. I love traveling, so it's
Yeah.
pretty cool you got to travel while working.
Yeah, it's good and bad. You don't really get to see the places though.
True. With that though, I believe like diversity and inclusion and getting involved with various cultures can lead to learnings.
Mhm.
So is there anything that you took away from that experience that influenced your approach in building Arvist?
Absolutely, yeah, and you're 100% right. Visiting all these places across the same company, you have similar company-wide policies, yet at a local level, people operate very differently, especially, in the supply chain world where you are working with a lot of blue-collar workers, temp workforce, who may not even know your language sometimes, right? So of course, the managers and others speak English, and that's normal. But locally, the culture might be very different. So adapting to that at various locations, you can't just go in and enforce what you did and what worked at the US facility will work in the facility in India or China, and what vice versa, right? What work over there may not work in Germany and Denmark. So you have to be flexible in your approaches and how you get the work done, but also what kind of policies and processes you want to put in place. So that was a really good insight for me, understanding the nuances in different regions, how everyone works. But what was also interesting on the flip side is even with all these changes, at a cultural level, problems are same across the board. When you're talking
Right.
about supply chain inefficiencies and the process inefficiencies, they're there. Whether it's an automated plant in Germany, a very manual plant somewhere else. So it was an interesting thing to notice over there.
Definitely agree. So I currently still work with Walmart e-commerce in a automated fulfillment center,
Mhm.
and I had the opportunity to work at a previous fulfillment center that wasn't automated, and
Right.
it's cool to see the differences, but there's still a long way to go with
Mhm.
improvements.
For sure. Yeah. No, it's called continuous improvement for a reason, right? It's never done. There's no facility which is perfect.
How did you go about getting to market and your first few clients?
It was a long road for sure. You know, getting the first client can be defined as a first proof of concept, or a pilot, or you could consider it as a first revenue generating customer, right? And
Right.
I really believe, and this is not just my belief, but one of my very close mentors, right? He told me a business is real when it makes money from customers, right? So you can get all the funding from accelerators and investors and whatnot, but only when someone's paying for your product, it's when your business truly becomes real. And that took us a while, right? Like I said, we got first few initial proof of concepts with our safety product. Then we went into this accelerator program, after which we conducted a much serious customer discovery round of interviews. And that's when we started discovering the nuances of what and how we should pivot our product to actually get people to pay for it. Right. So it was almost 14 months before we got our first paying customer. And so, yeah, it took a lot of tweaks, not just to the story and messaging, but also to the product itself. And one thing that also helped me was that prior 7, 8 years of experience being in the supply chain world. I wouldn't say I had like a massive network, but at least I knew people that I could tap into, people who came on board as advisors, guided me, and made introductions to get those first one or two customers.
Awesome. Congrats on that. It seemed like a long journey, but you got where you needed to go.
Yeah.
So, with that, you had the opportunity to join Techstars,
Mhm.
which is an unbelievable community in the startup ecosystem. Can you share a bit about your experience being involved with that community? And then, what advice would you have to offer founders wanting to apply?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Techstars was a great, leap for us. That was one of the first big milestones, if you will, that we hit with Arvist. As you know, getting into Techstars is not easy at all. They get tens of thousands of applications, not just thousands, and they pick like 10 to 12 companies per cohort. We were also, funnily, it was our second attempt at Techstars. We tried it first time, we did not get through, but we had really good feedback from the managing director of that particular program on where we were as a company and where we need to get before we should apply again. So second time around, when we applied, we did get in. And overall, as a first time founder, spent a lot of time in corporate world right before this. As a first time startup founder, it was a great, I would say, crash course, if you will, into the startup world. People call it MBA in 3 months. It was pretty much like that. A deep dive into not just like how to go about fundraising, how to go about pitching, but also just the vocabulary, right? What are the terms people use when you're going to fundraising? So you're not like a novice, right? When you're when you're speaking to the investors first time, and they also spend quite a lot of time around getting you ready for what they call the demo day, and it's basically pitching in front of the audience, combination of customers and investors. But that sometimes feels like, hey, I'm not working on my business, I'm preparing more for the demo day. But it's also been, in hindsight, very helpful. As a founder, you're pitching every day, right? Like to your customers, to your employees, whoever, everyone, right? I'm pitching right
Right.
now, right? So all of that helps on making sure you have a cohesive story, you have a clear way of telling what you're trying to achieve, knowing your audience, things like that. So I think overall it was a great experience. And to answer your second question around advice for founders applying to Techstars, I would say there's There's a lot of Techstars programs now. Some of them are major programs, or they're called city programs. So Chicago, Boston, Denver, they are more like common or generic, if you will. The program we went to was more focused on supply chain and advanced technologies. So if you have a particular niche, then find that program. Reach out to those teams. They are very open. The managing director, the associates, they always usually have like open office hours where you can talk to them. And I would say reach out to Techstars founders, right? So if they're in your region, you'll obviously find someone and they would be more than happy to chat, give you advice, as well as give you reference or referrals. You don't get into Techstars through referrals, but at least you can get in touch with the MDs through that, and you can ask them questions and prepare better for what would make for a good application. So yeah, it's like most of the accelerator programs. It's the application process itself is a good enough insight into your business. Helps you put a lot of things in perspective on where you are, customer wise, revenue wise, traction wise, and a lot of other things.
Thanks for that great overview.
Mhm.
Plan on applying in the future or to another accelerator like Y Combinator. So
Happy
I
to
really
help.
appreciate that
Yeah.
advice. So also in entrepreneurship, you come across situations where you face rejection, like you previously mentioned, but you have to learn from it. Do you have any other stories or strategies that helped you overcome self doubt in the past to boost your confidence as a founder?
Yeah, have a lot of stories around that. So one of them is quite recent, right? So we recently are just closing up our pre-seed funding round, and when we had just started the funding round, raising the funds, right? I was at about like 22 rejections from investors and angels that we had spoken to, and I was like, feeling obviously very down, right? And I was talking to this other founder, and I told him, hey, dude, we got like 22 rejections. And he's like, oh, you're just warming up, right? And he's like, we spoke to 240 people before we got our funding. And I was like, okay. So he's like, yeah, just keep talking, just think about it as, the warm up games before you pitch and for the big ones. And that was like more of an attitude shift, right? It was the same thing. I was like, okay, that makes me feel good. But that's what I realized at that time. Talking to your peers, your other founders in your community, or wherever, even if it's online, it helps a lot to understand that you're not by yourself, right? A lot of people are going through the same things. It also helps to vent a lot. It's like, hey, this guy told me this. It's like, yeah, it's okay. I have had worse conversations, so that helps a lot to have that kind of community. So as a founder, it gets really lonely, if you will. You can't really share, even if you have like co-founders, if you have team members. Sometimes it's just you as the founder and CEO. You can't really go and tell. No one would understand what you're trying to say, but other founders would. They are in your positions, or they have at least gone through what you've been, right? So you either find people who have already been where you are, or who are going through the same things as you. That definitely helps boost your confidence and gets you out of the self doubt and self destruction cycle, if you will. Uh, so yeah, that's definitely my
Thanks
advice over there.
thanks for that. Diving deeper into the process a little bit, how do you find like the VCs to reach out to?
There's multiple different ways to go about it, and regardless of what people say, warm intros still rule the method of communication with VCs. That is changing at the earlier stage. There are at least a few funds that I know here in Chicago, and some people that we have talked to who solely accept startup applications through their portals or through their websites and have like zero warm intros. So that is changing, which is great, right? It opens up a lot of doors for people who do not have connections like me, right? Like first time founders. I don't know anyone who to reach out to. In that case, of course, for us, Techstars help a lot, not just having that validation from a famous accelerator that we have been vetted. It's a legit company, right? And we're building something good over here using their network, using our advisors' network, but then again, coming to that peer network. Even in warm intros, if you get a warm intro from a portfolio founder of a VC, That's golden, right? So we have investors now. If you reach out to me and I give one of our investors that, hey, Colton is building this, why don't you talk to him? They would trust me to only give them leads which are good, right? Not just any and every one. So that would be one way. And of course, a lot of meetups or just networking for sure. That is also another way of reaching out. People also discount a lot of analyst and scout outreach over emails. You know, Sometimes it is a waste of times. A lot of times, I never say no to a meeting, right? And that's a good and a bad thing, especially early on when you are building up your relationships. You want to meet as many people as possible, right? Once you have your business going, once you are at a certain stage, then you need to prioritize and maybe you hand off certain meetings to certain people and delegate. But early on, take as many meetings as possible. Go out, meet people. Some of them might not be useful, and you're just like, okay, this event was a waste of time. This happy hour, I did not meet anyone. And it's okay, right? It's part of the process. But once you have enough people, that critical mass, if you will, then you are always in that first or second degree connection with a lot of people. And as much as I don't like LinkedIn, it's one of the only networking tools in the professional world which you can really use it to a great extent. Twitter or X is also has used to be very, very helpful. Now it's a little more complicated to use, I think. Personally speaking, you can't message people without the check mark and all that stuff. So
Right, for sure. So going off of that to dive deeper into Arvist and your mission, I understand the value proposition as I work in the space, but can you explain a little bit more about it for the audience? And then, like, what do you see the future becoming?
absolutely, yeah. So what we are building at Arvist in is real-time digital twins of warehousing and logistics operation using existing infrastructure. Right now, so to put it in layman's terms, warehouses are at the heart of supply chain, right? So everything which is coming from anywhere in the world and that gets to you has to pass through one or two or more warehouses, distribution centers, storage places, as you might want to call them. These institutes or organizations, they operate separately. Sometimes they're owned by organizations like Walmart or Target. Sometimes they're owned by mom and pop shops. Sometimes they're just private independent companies which are in these spaces. Efficiency over here in warehouses is still a major bottleneck, right? And we haven't gone to a lights out warehousing environment, at least not at majority of the companies, right? Sure, Walmarts and Amazons have some DCs which are automated, but that's also a small percentage, right? So what we're trying to do with Arvist is, without asking the customers to invest in new hardware, new infrastructure, IoT sensors and devices, how can we give them insights using the data which is already present to improve their operations? So how we do that is by bringing in data from their existing security camera feeds. So video data, which is very rich in content. There's a lot of things that you can gain from that, as well as bringing in data from their WMS or warehouse management systems and ERP platforms, and combining those two and giving them insights around their loading docks, the time it took to bring in the goods, unload the trucks, the quality of the material or the pallets coming in, and also in risk mitigation side, so collisions or near misses with forklifts, ergonomics of employees, so how are they lifting things and what are the chances of someone getting a back injury. All of these are different sort of ways that we can continue to make the process more efficient. And in essence, the vision, if you will, for the company is to become more of a remote operations platform, right? So where you can manage and understand safety, security, risks, productivity of the warehouses from a remote setting. I could be sitting in Chicago and I could manage 4 or 5 different facilities around the country without actually being present at each one. And this is not to say that it's an automated facility. It still has humans and a combination of robots or just manual as well. But from a management perspective, it becomes much more easier. So that's what we're trying to do and build with Arvist.
Amazing. Yeah. I definitely can see the use of that, especially with the safety aspect and forklifts. Can you share how you spend time during your day and prioritize different tasks?
So this would have been a very different answer like 2 years before. ago when I was a product manager and like I had a normal 9 to 5 job. It was easier to prioritize. As a founder, it is very hard to prioritize on certain things. Everything is important, right? And we have a small team now. We are 5 people. Everyone other than me is technical. So they're the ones building the products. You have HR problems, legal problems, marketing, sales, fundraising. All of these are on my plate. So to answer your question in an easy format, right? It has to be what's most important for your business at this moment in time. Sometimes, yes, you have to prioritize multiple things in a day. When we were out fundraising, I had to not only tell myself, but I had to convince myself that we have to put sales at the site, right? I cannot do both. If you're trying to do both, you're not focusing on either, right?
Mm.
So we concentrated 100% on fundraising. We had about 75% of that closed, and then I started to bring in like at least 30% of my effort was in sales, 70% on fundraising, right? Because we had some comfort level on the fundraising side of things. Now that the round is closed, it's 100% on sales. But yeah, sure, everything else on marketing, legal front continues to take place. So it's really what's most important for the business at this current moment has to take place. I think in as a small team or a big team, I've led teams which were large in size as well. Eventually, if you have good people, good hires, you have to bring them in with a level of trust. So one of the good things is I don't have to prioritize the technology piece, right? I know our CTO is taking care of it. Of course, we have regular check-ins, meetings, and product demos. It's a small team, but I don't have to worry that, hey, are we sure that we are using this piece of technology, which is the the state of the art? Not. He is there. He's going to take care of it, and I have to trust him with that. And eventually, when we have people in finance or in marketing, I would want to bring in folks who we have that level of trust that the decision that they took would be the best. It would be in the best interest of the company.
How do you find good candidates to hire?
Um, Good candidates to hire. A very tough question, right? In terms of, it's not a tough question. It's a tough problem, if you will. We are building an AI company, right? So yeah, we in theory are competing for the same talent as Tesla and Meta and Google, right? And of course, we cannot afford those kinds of salaries, even with equity or whatever. We cannot afford, right? We just can't match it. So we have to be realistic on that expectations. First of all, you need to find people who are motivated to work on the problem that you're trying to solve and who are motivated to work in a startup environment, right? And not everyone is, and which is fine, right? It's not to disparage anyone in that sense. I loved working in the corporate environment. I love working in startups, and I've met people who like either of them, right?
Mhm.
So for the going about hiring is it's very much similar to fundraising in a sense. You have to build a good network to find good candidates. All three hires that we have right now came through referrals or people who were building startups. I talked to other founders. There's a lot of Slack channels for different founder communities. You put in requests over there, and they're like, "Hey, we used to work with this guy. We don't have the requirement for this role anymore, or we have moved on, doing something else, whatever the case may be." So that is how we went about hiring. One of the things that I would really recommend and has worked out for us very well, and this is something that we learned from early hire mistakes as well, was not going all in, right? You could interview and you could spend a lot of time discussing equity compensation and benefits and what stake, vesting, all of that good stuff, right? And you're spending a couple of months doing all that negotiation. Instead, if you like someone, you interviewed it, you think there's a good chance that they would like to work for you, get on a contract with them, right? So even they would appreciate that because they want to know how your team's culture is, or how you're, if you're just a solo founder, how you are, right? So yeah, it gives both the parties, if you will, a chance to kick the tires and spend some time, create a small project, if you will, with some KPIs. That let's achieve this in the next 1 to maybe 3 months, right? We have done 3 month contracts as well. If everything goes well before the contract ends at the 3 month mark, you have time, right, to negotiate and discuss all the details about like how your salary and stuff like that would look like. So that gives time, as well as it's a real world project, and you're also getting stuff done for your startup, right? So it's like you're killing multiple birds with the stone over there.
It's a great strategy to have because you're shipping things, you're meeting KPIs. Can you give a specific example on how you measure success?
That is very much role dependent, right? So if you're hiring someone in the artificial intelligence role, AI, machine learning engineer, then it would be around, let's say, this is a particular feature set that customers requested. It's not the entire product, right? It's just one feature inside a product that we need to ship up, right? So the timelines we have promised them 6 weeks. Can we get it delivered in 6 weeks to the customer that they can start using? That's a good KPI. But it goes a little beyond that, right? Like how you got to the solution of the problem, right? Is it well documented that someone else can pick it up from where you left off? Was the best method used to solve that problem, right? If there is an open source solution available, there's no need to recreate something from the scratch, right? And this can be a company to company strategy, right? Some might just prefer to build their own IP. Some might prefer to use open source and deliver fast. It's up to the company's strategy. But so that would be very much dependent over there. Similarly, if you're bringing in someone for sales, marketing, there's different KPIs, right? Were we able to revamp the website with new content in that particular time frame? Did we have to outsource a lot of work? Were they able to take on the responsibilities without setting up 100 meetings? There's multiple ways you can craft that KPIs out.
Cool. Sounds good. Moving on, are there any habits that have helped you get where you are today?
Good habits or bad habits?
I suppose both.
Yeah, no, let's stick with the good ones for for the purpose I hear. But I think being organized is one, and I thought that was very much overrated till I got into the founder role. And you had asked me about prioritization, right? If you're not organized, there's prioritization doesn't come into play at all because you don't even know what you're doing, right? So having that level of like, okay, we are supposed to do these tasks. These are the investors I'm supposed to get in touch with. These are the customers I'm supposed to follow on it. So having some kind of organization, and there's so many tools out there, but sometimes it's just Google spreadsheets, Excel. That's good enough. Just keep a tab of everything that you're supposed to do. So there's no excuses over there that, hey, I cannot afford a HubSpot. Okay, don't just put it on Google spreadsheet, and at least keep a tab of what you're working on. So that kind of organization is really helpful. I think one of the things that we touched upon earlier about having that multicultural experience right across the world, and I told you about being flexible and adaptive, right? That's also very important as you work with new people. Sometimes you're working with outside vendors to get small parts of the projects done. You're talking to a lot of different kinds of customers, different kinds of investors, some who may like you, some who may not. Some are customers where you're trying to sell and they'll outright reject you as like, hey, get out of my face. And
Oh my.
you have to be you have to be flexible, and you have to keep smiling, if you will. You can't let one investor rejection at 2:30 p.m. make your 3 p.m. call with another one go bad, right? So you have to be really ready to adapt to different situations over there. So I think both of those, having being organized and being adaptable in nature, can be really helpful traits for founders.
You had to develop that continuous improvement mindset. Do you have any tips on developing that?
Continuous improvement mindset. I think one of them would be, and this may not apply to everyone. I love to read. I like to read books about founders, people who have been and done that. There's a saying that there everything that you want to do has been done, or done by someone, right? So why not learn from their mistakes, right? You don't need to go out and make all the mistakes everyone did as well. So I would say do that. Always, if there's opportunities to go out and learn, try meet people or founders who have been in your place before. Sometimes they're like way off, right? Like IPO founders. And if they're in your community area speaking, go to those events, talk to them, right? And tell them what you're going through. And more likely than not, they'll at least spend 5 minutes with you, and you can learn from them. In terms of continuous improvement, it is exactly what it says, right? It doesn't happen overnight, but small habits can make a ton of difference down the line. And same goes for bad habits as well. We were joking about it earlier, but it can lead to a destructive cycle very, very fast, especially in the founder journey. And like I said, sometimes you're alone and you don't realize you're going down that path until it's too late. So it's important to be cognizant about where you are.
So a few follow-ups. First, what are some of your favorite books? And then how do you balance the founder life with outside life?
So I have a reader. Some of the books that I read multiple books at the same time. So if I get bored, I can switch. And since these are not fiction books, it's fine. You can jump from one to the other. Some of the ones that I read recently are Andy Dunn's book, Burn Rate.
Oh, burn rate. Yeah.
It's a really good book, especially focused on what we were just talking about. I read this book by Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney. He talks a lot about leadership skills and developing your team. It's a really good one. And there's another one which I'm reading. It's from Netflix. Is Reed Hastings, if I'm not wrong. And I think they wrote a book about how, if you know, right, Netflix is one of the best places to work in the world, right? And it was always the case when even they had like 10, 15 to 20 employees, it was still a really good place, and they continued building that culture, how they went about it. Again, a really, really good book to read. And the second question, what was it?
How do you balance outside life with being a founder?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I would say I'm guilty of not balancing it all the time, and which is not a great thing at all, and nothing to be proud of. Sometimes you get caught up in work so much that you avoid, going out or trying to balance it out. What I have been doing in the last few months, at least, is I've put Saturday as a complete stop to work. And both days is very hard. So I'm just like, at least Saturday, there won't be any work. If it's important enough, team can always text me, call me. But I also encourage my team to do the same. It's like, okay, just take a break, right? It's We're humans, right? And it's not gonna it go on for a few months, and we'll feel good that we are achieving a lot. But overall, it's on a 6 month, 1 year horizon, it's not going to help any of us. So it's important to take those breaks, and take vacations as well. Getting involved in sports or extracurricular activities, even it's just going out to gym or just walk, helps a lot. And not going out with your headphones on and listening to a productivity podcast, maybe just listening to conversations or stories. That's way better. I feel just disconnect from the business world for a bit is something that I would encourage. At least 24 hours in a week is important.
For sure, I definitely need to do more of that myself.
Yeah.
Working full time and then doing the podcast, newsletter, trying to start something else on the side. So thanks for the reminder. I love
Mhm.
going outside, walking my dog, and just
Yeah.
enjoying nature. And then as well spending time with my wife.
Yeah, and you probably realize that, right? Like when once you do that, coming back to work, it becomes at least 2x productivity, if not 5x, right? If you take a longer break, it becomes a 5x productivity. That's what I've noticed as well. So definitely encourage everyone to do that.
For sure. And then with the book you mentioned, Burn Rate, he focuses on mental health. So
Right.
we have to eliminate the stigma of that in today's society and just
100%.
prioritize it as well.
Absolutely. 100% agreed.
Moving on to the last segment of the show, I call it Idea Factory. So, my audience is primarily founders, and I want to provide them with business ideas that they could create. Can you offer any actionable business ideas that aspiring founders could explore and potentially develop?
So this is gonna be a tough one. I started solving or building Arvist because of a problem I saw in the industry, right? And that is something you can take it for what it's worth. It's something that I really believe that if you see an actual problem, go out and solve that. Don't try to create a solution and then start looking for a problem, right? That is what a lot of times that's what happens. I'm guilty of that too. We built out solutions which were like, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So then you're trying to force your solution on everyone. So I would really
It's
encourage,
fun, right, to do
Mhm.
that? I mean,
Yeah,
that's the easy path to do.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, and it's fun. Yeah, if you want to do it as a side project, great, right? Like, but if you want to build a real business, then go out, talk to people, find what problems they have, right? And what interests you, right? Like you said, you like to walk your dog. If you want to start something in the pet care industry, there's go to the pet supplies company, right? Go to people who have dogs. Go to people who are taking care of dogs or the dog daycare kind of things. All of them might have different sets of problems, and one of them might inspire you to create a solution around that particular problem. So the worst someone can do is type in Google, is like, hey, what are some good ideas to start a company? And I could be completely wrong and off base on that, but that's just what I feel.
Thank you. Yeah, you definitely have to immerse yourself in your target audience and see the pain points to figure out the solution.
Right? Yeah. And in a field that you enjoy building in, right? It's not
Right.
just because it's a cool thing to do right now, because that will change. In 6 months, you won't find that cool anymore, and you'll be stuck with a business that you don't enjoy. So make sure you're doing your research in a field you actually enjoy.
Yeah, because if you do that as well, like facing rejection will be harder if you're not passionate about it.
100%. Yeah.
Is there anyone you admire in the startup community?
A lot of people. There's so many mentors, advisors, friends who have supported me in the journey, and also some people that I don't know who I admire. One person that I can definitely tell is Trisha Martinez. She was the MD of Techstars, where we got in the program. So she was the first person to believe in me and
Huh.
what we are building over here. But not just that, that was almost a year and a half ago. Till date, I reach out to her and she would be like, okay, yeah, tell me, how can I help? Right? She's always been that guiding force and always been supportive of me in the journey. So definitely someone I really admire.
Amazing. Yeah, having that support network is key and someone you can go to for advice.
For sure.
Do you have any last minute thoughts? And then where could people find you at? And how could the audience be useful to you?
If you want any help, if you're starting off a company, if you want to just talk, chat, like I said, having a peer founder network is always very helpful. I'm happy to be that voice or ear, if you whatever you prefer. You can find me on LinkedIn. It's easy to find me. It's my first name and last name, Nilay Parikh, and type in Arvist. You'll see me. I'm also on Twitter. It's Nilay Parikh 13, and you can follow me over there and always reach out to me via either of those mediums. Always happy to chat with other founders. That's my favorite part of my job, is talking to other founders.
I love doing that as well. That's why I started this podcast.
That's great.
Uh, so thank you for being on the show. Episode 6. Remember to be grateful and stay blessed.